Hi, this is Ashish Kuthaila at the DevOps Enterprise Summit in San Francisco 2017. Joining me today is Pauly from the Hearst Media, all the way from Seattle.
Yes.
Welcome, Pauly. How are
Thank
you?
you. It's great to be here. It's always a great event. So very excited.
So, we're very glad to have you here. Just before this interview started, I asked you a very interesting question that I think would be of interest to everyone. Your title says VP of DevOps.
Yes.
And in DevOps, there are roles and there are other roles, and you can give it lots of different titles. Love to hear from you. What do you do on a daily basis? What keeps you awake? And you know, how do you kind of manage your job? What does VP of DevOps really mean?
Yeah, it's an interesting title, and I think it was made when we were still feeling out what that meant for the business. Hearst is a holding company, and so they buy organizations. So we have very distinct and unique organizations, and each one runs autonomously. And so I was brought on to help sort of mentor and guide transformational change in each one of those. And we really sort of ascribe to this notion that we don't really worry so much about what the title is. It's really more about the outcomes and what we're doing to move and help grow the business internally, organically, and grow each person inside of that organization. So we tend to focus across the board on CI and CD and Agile and Kanban and Lean. And DevOps is the culture that we aspire to. And so I don't have a separate team. I'm not a middleman between dev or ops. And think of it more sort of as a mentor and consultancy to really help move things forward and be a sounding
You're like
board.
a coach.
Exactly, yes. Almost like an agile coach, but on a broader scale.
Broader scale.
Yeah.
And so you said you have 12 different businesses that you're kind of responsible for to coach or to move forward in the direction that you guys want to go. Where are you coming from in terms of where you were, and what's the vision you're moving towards, and what role have you played there?
So we have three verticals. We have healthcare, transportation, and finance. All three of those are moving at different rates, different speeds. Within each vertical, there are multiple businesses. The idea behind this was, how do we really lean forward into these new processes, technologies, and approaches to software development? We've become software companies, just like everyone else. Software is incredibly important to us as we move forward and try and branch into new markets. And so we were looking at sort of, moving away from the traditional what got us here mentalities and processes, and looking forward to what will get us to the next stage. So moving away from, waterfall was an initial sort of track we had where we were trying to find ways where it made sense, consolidating data centers and moving to the cloud so that we can be more reactive and adaptive to new markets and new customer demands. Really changing the culture such that we push decision making out and closer to where the actual work is being accomplished. And so a lot of those things are really just sort of changing the gestalt, how we think about what it is to be a software business at Hearst Media in 2017 and beyond.
So very interesting. Media business, also a software business. Maybe just to enlighten our viewers a little bit, what does it mean to run a media business as a software business? So as a layman, I would think, well, I access it on the web, maybe on my phone, but it's way beyond that, right? The software plays a very critical role in your business today, and I would imagine it's important to have the latest and greatest, and at the pace at which the business demands, for you to move the business forward. So, what role does software end up playing in growing your business?
For us, we have two mechanisms for getting the content. We're really content oriented into the hands of consumers. One way is direct, so you come to us, which means we have to write software, SaaS-based applications, as an example, that allows you to access our data on the back end. In some cases, people and businesses and organizations want to consume that so that they can use that content in their own applications. So the second vertical is really looking at creating, REST-based APIs and other methods that are secure, that allow.
It's almost like a B2B consumption.
It is, right? And in some cases, people say, listen, we know what we want to do with the content. We just need the content. So it's just licensing. But being able to access it, getting it on demand, so what they want when they want it, as opposed to eating the whole bowl and having to get all of the content at once. Again, that's sort of two different mantras of waterfall would be getting everything and then loading it into your database. We don't do that, right? We do on demand,
Right.
and in that way, it's very agile and
It's
very
continuous
adaptive.
delivery at demand
At the scale of content,
the
right?
scale of
Exactly.
content.
Yeah, absolutely. And that really empowers our customers to be able to decide how they want to absorb the content.
And on the production side, where the content is coming from,
Hmm.
software plays a great importance too as well.
Absolutely. Ingress, ETL, really taking in, we tend to get data inputs, especially in the healthcare vertical, from many different formats. Transportation is not
Right.
that different. And we then have to take those and consume them and then move them into a standardized format so that we can produce content that our consumers
So
can
I
use.
would imagine that there are many touch points from the source of the content all the way to consumption.
Yes.
And so if you're looking at a DevOps methodology and philosophy of managing this, it entails a lot of what you said, pushing down the decisions to those
Hmm.
who are closer to action. So how do you balance this act of, are people going through the right process, doing the right things,
Hmm.
versus taking this in a traditional environment? You would have somebody watching over this, somebody actually taking a decision, somebody signing off on one
Right.
thing before it goes on. So
Checks
there are
and
many
balances.
checks and balances. So in a lot of instances, a lot of other industries, people are scared to embrace DevOps because it decentralizes a lot of the power making.
True.
So how have you dealt with that, and what mechanisms have you built in?
Well, in healthcare and finance especially, are heavily regulated,
Yes.
and so we use data sciences heavily in order to create processes that will adhere to those regulatory compliance needs for those verticals. And so in doing that, we can then use the data sciences and AI to actually create automation in a way that we haven't been able to do in the past. And that really helps to create pipelines where we reduce the amount of human touch, which
Right.
also means we reduce the amount of potential for error. And someone at one of the conversations earlier today said, I think it was Key Bank, said, just because you don't do a thing often doesn't mean you don't automate it. In fact, maybe that's the reason why you should automate it. And so we really sort of encapsulate that mantra of let's automate everything where we could have extreme high opportunity for error.
There's what's the right word? Consistency once you
Hmm.
get it right. Like I always say, the machine will always do the thing the way you ask it to do it
Hmm.
every single time.
Right.
You might do it wrong
Yeah.
every single
But it
time,
did
but
what you
once you get
asked.
it right, then it's going to do it every single time.
And that when we talked about, or when you talked about, pushing that decision making
Right.
down and out, and when it makes that middle tier very nervous, it feels like a little bit of a loss of control and power.
Absolutely.
Again, one way to counter that is to say we're building the knowledge into the systems in the process.
Yes.
And the process is very, very lean, right? It's only this
Right.
tiny amount of process. It's really mostly in the system. And that means that you get that consistency
Right.
because the overall pipeline is the same every time.
Absolutely.
And if you put something into the pipeline that shouldn't be in there, typically it get kicked out. Think of APIs as a good example. So we use
Absolutely. It's no
microservices.
different than a CD pipeline.
It's exactly right. We
Where
do
you
the
have
same thing.
feedback loops, something doesn't work, you have automated gates, it doesn't pass through.
Right, and the error doesn't propagate downstream.
Yes. Theoretically, no error should propagate through.
Theoretically, unfortunately, we live in the real world, so things happen. But
So what's next for your company? What's next vision-wise? Where are you taking this?
so we're actually, and this was my talk here this year, was we're really moving further up the value stream and looking at how the business can join us on this journey around encapsulating ideas and then stretching them out so that we can have DevOps, not just between dev and ops, but between the business and the engineering.
Absolutely.
Most organizations that I've talked to have had some challenges around the product management and feeding that pipeline
Yes.
and getting it smoothly through to the development phase. And so we've put a lot of effort into trying to make sure that that pipeline is fed appropriately and we get rid of those barriers to flow early in the process.
Right.
The last 3 years we've been focusing further downstream on things like CI and
Moving it
CD.
upstream, yeah.
And then sort of much like Goldratt, we realized that once we removed those bottlenecks,
Right.
the next biggest one was actually further upstream. So we did value stream mappings.
It's about removing the biggest bottleneck and addressing the next one, and then addressing.
Yeah, you'll never be without one. Sort of like chasing performance around your data center. But
That's very interesting to hear, how you are addressing this. I want to thank you once
Thank
more
you.
for joining us. and we hope to kind of see you every year at this conference.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
And this is Ashish Kuthaila at the DevOps Enterprise Summit 2017 wrapping up. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.